They warned me about solitude, said it could mess with your head, the stillness, the altitude, the way the wind starts to sound like a voice when you haven't heard one in days. But I've always liked being alone. In fact, I thought that was the best part of the job. Up here, 1,200 feet above the earth, suspended in a box of cold steel, there's no one breathing down your neck, no honking traffic, no small talk, just forests stretching endlessly in every direction, a sea of black-green treetops, and a silence so complete it hums in your ears like pressure from inside your skull. That silence broke last night. It was just after midnight. I was half asleep. In the operator cabin, the radio long dead. It never works out here anyway, when I heard it. A metallic scrape, soft and deliberate, against the tower's lower rungs. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then it came again, and again. Rhythmic, measured, climbing. I sat up, heart already racing, and pressed my face against the dirty glass. I couldn't see anything in the dark, just the red aircraft warning light blinking on and off above me. But the sound kept coming. Closer now, maybe 30 feet below, then 20. Whatever it wasn't stopping. I killed the interior lights, hold my breath, listened. No birds, no breeze, just that sound. Scrape, clink, scrape, clink. I stared out into the night, trying to spot movement. And then I saw it, not clearly, but just enough to know something was there. A shape, too long, too fast, climbing with a hunger that didn't feel right. I operate a crane on a remote tower site, miles from civilization. And last night, something was coming up to meet me. Something that didn't move like it was human. I haven't told anyone this before. Not my supervisor, not my girlfriend, not even the guy who trained me on this site. I just don't know how to talk about it, but I think I need to know. I need someone to hear it, someone like you. You seem like the kind of person who's seen strange things too. Maybe not on a tower crane in the middle of nowhere, but somewhere off the map. Somewhere the signal drops and the air gets to still. Somewhere the wind carries voices that aren't supposed to exist. I know how it sounds. I know how I sound. That's why I've kept my mouth shut for the past few weeks. But ever since that night, the one I'm about to tell you about, I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a time. I wake up sweating, gasping for air like I'm still hundreds of feet in the air. Like I'm still trapped in that little metal box, watching something crawl toward me that shouldn't even be able to climb. It wasn't just a bad dream, I know. What dreams feel like? I've had plenty. Dreams don't leave claw marks on steel. Dreams don't follow you home. Dreams don't make the birds in your backyard stop singing every time you step outside. Look before I tell you everything I want. You two promise me something. Promise me you won't go looking for this site. I know how some people are obsessed with urban legends, haunted places, and off-grid mysteries. But this isn't a haunted house in the suburbs. This is real, remote, dangerous. There's a reason the project shut down the week after I filed the report. There's a reason no one returned my calls. They know something too. The crane's still out there. I saw it on satellite view last week, isolated in the woods. No roads leading in anymore. The company scrubbed their name off the project page. It's like the whole thing never happened. But I still hear it. Not just in my head, but sometimes, when I'm outside at night, I swear I hear that same metallic scrape. That slow, deliberate climb. It comes from nowhere, then fades like it was never there. That's why I'm telling you this now, because I don't know what else to do. Every night, I replay it in my mind. Every second, every sound. The moment I realized I wasn't alone. The moment I knew it wasn't a person. This job was supposed to be simple. Rotate shifts, run the rig, sleep in the prefab cabin, rinse and repeat. No distractions, no city noise. Just me, a radio that never worked, and the trees. The cabin itself had basic plywood walls. No insulation worth a damn. A cot in the corner that creaked every time I breathed. There were no neighbors, no crew stationed nearby, just the supply truck that came twice a week to drop off food and fuel. And there was no signal. That's not just exaggeration. We were so far out, you'd be lucky to catch a single bar on the highest point of the crane, and even that cut out every 10 seconds. It was the kind of isolation most people fantasize about. Peaceful, silent, slow, but that's the thing. The silence starts to feel wrong after a while, especially when it breaks. It started small, like most things do. A knocking sound that seemed to come from beneath the cabin floorboards. I figured it was just the wood settling. Then came the nights where the wind would go completely still. Not a breeze, not a sway of the trees. Total silence, like the forest was holding its breath. I'd step outside to check the generator, and there'd be this pressure in the air. Like something was watching from the dark between the trees. Something that didn't blink. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. Sleep deprivation, isolation, too much caffeine. But then the lights in the cabin started to flicker. The clock stopped exactly at 3:13 a.m., 3 nights in a row. My reflection. In the mirror, I swear, it moved out of sync once. Just once. Enough to freeze me in place for 10 full minutes. Still, I stayed. It's hard to explain, but part of me felt like leaving would make it worse. Like whatever it was, whatever presence had settled over that place wanted me to run. And I refused to give it to them, until the night I had no choice. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to hear how it really started. Not the moment it reached the top, not the moment it looked through the glass, but the days before. The signs, the warnings, the way the forest changed. The way my body started reacting before my mind caught up. Because it wasn't just an encounter, it was an invasion. A slow, creeping one. The kind that learns your name before it speaks it. So, lean in, keep the lights low. And whatever you do, don't listen to this alone. Because I operated a crane on a remote tower site, and something climbed up to find me. They told me the site was so remote that even GPS didn't know where the hell it was. The foreman handed me a faded paper map, the edges torn and smudged with years of grease and rain, and said, "Follow the logging road until the trees feel wrong. You'll know when to stop." That was the exact phrase. When the trees feel wrong. I didn't ask what he meant. I should have. But the job paid double what I usually made. Crane operators are used to height, to isolation, but this was something else entirely. The road twisted through forests that got denser and darker the deeper I went. Pines arched over the gravel like they were trying to keep secrets. The signal on my phone dropped to 0, about 20 miles before I hit the clearing. That clearing, it looked like someone had carved it out of the woods with a scream. Dead grass, a broken fence, and a temporary trailer sat crooked on the edge of the site, like it was trying not to be noticed. And in the middle stood the base of the tower. The tower itself was halfway built, a steel skeleton stretching up into the gray sky. My crane was already there, parked beside it, silent, like a sleeping thing. It was a 300-ton crawler crane with a 250-foot boom, standard for this kind of work. But nothing else felt standard. Not the way the wind moved, choppy, sudden, like it was being funneled by something you couldn't see. Not the way the air smelled. Wet metal, and something else, something older. The trailer was where I slept. It wasn't meant for long stays, but I was told the site was too far for a daily commute. So I unpacked. 1 week rotation, all meals packed in, no contact unless it was an emergency radio only. It felt more like an outpost than a job site. Inside, the trailer had that usual temporary stink, stale coffee, plastic walls, the sour musk of a dozen guys who'd come before me. But it was what I noticed outside that made me stop. There were no birds, not one. No fluttering, no calls. Even the insects were quiet, and the trees didn't move with the wind. They jerked, like puppets on invisible strings. When the sun dipped, It got cold fast, colder than it should have for that time of year. The windows of the trailer fogged from the inside, but the mirror in the bathroom steamed up without me running water. On my second night, the alarm clock beside my cot stopped blinking. Not like the power went out, it just froze. 3:13 a.m., I know, because I watched it stay there while I sat up in bed, sweating like I'd run a mile. I hadn't heard anything, but I'd woken up gasping, heart pounding. The trailer was quiet, too quiet. I flicked on my flashlight and walked to the narrow window that looked out toward the tower. Something had moved the boom. That crane hadn't been touched since I arrived, but the boom now pointed slightly off-center, angled just enough for me to notice. I told myself it was windy. Wind does weird things with structures that tall, but when I stepped outside the next morning to check, there were fresh prints in the frost-covered mud. Not boot prints, bare, human-shaped, but too long in the toe, too narrow in the arch. I didn't take a picture. I didn't want to admit it was real. They told me this tower site had gone through 3 operators in 2 months. Family emergencies, was what the report said. Nobody ever stayed long enough to finish the job. But the pay keeps rising, and desperation makes you ignore the little things. The twitch in your gut, the way your dreams feel like they're trying to warn you. By the end of my 3rd night, I started hearing clicks in the radio static. Not voices, just sharp, deliberate ticks like someone was tapping a fingernail on the other end of the line. The weirdest part, it always started around 3:13 a.m. I kept telling myself I was just tired. That isolation messes with your head. That being 200 feet up in a metal box in the dead of night would make anyone see things, hear things. But I knew, deep down, I wasn't alone. The forest wasn't empty. The tower wasn't just steel. And that thing, whatever it wasn't just watching me. It was waiting. They told me the site was so remote that even GPS didn't know where the hell it was. The foreman handed me a faded paper map, the edges torn and smudged with years of grease and rain, and said, "Follow the logging road until the trees feel wrong. You'll know when to stop." That was the exact phrase. When the trees feel wrong, I didn't ask what he meant. I should have. But the job paid double what I usually made. Crane operators are used to height, to isolation, but this was something else entirely. The road twisted through forests that got denser and darker the deeper I went. Pines arched over the gravel like they were trying to keep secrets. The signal on my phone dropped to 0 about 20 miles before I hit the clearing. That clearing, it looked like someone had carved it out of the woods with a scream. Dead grass, a broken fence, and a temporary trailer sat crooked on the edge of the site, like it was trying not to be noticed. And in the middle stood the base of the tower. The tower itself was halfway built, a steel skeleton stretching up into the gray sky. My crane was already there, parked beside it, silent, like a sleeping thing. It was a 300-ton crawler crane with a 250-foot boom, standard for this kind of work. But nothing else felt standard. Not the way the wind moved, choppy, sudden, like it was being funneled by something you couldn't see. Not the way the air smelled. Wet metal, and something else, something older. The trailer was where I slept. It wasn't meant for long stays, but I was told the site was too far for a daily commute. So I unpacked. 1-week rotation, all meals packed in, no contact unless it was an emergency radio only. It felt more like an outpost than a job site. Inside, the trailer had that usual temporary stink, stale coffee, plastic walls, the sour musk of a dozen guys who'd come before me. But it was what I noticed outside that made me stop. There were no birds, not one. No fluttering, no calls. Even the insects were quiet, and the trees didn't move with the wind. They jerked, like puppets on invisible strings. When the sun dipped, it got cold fast, colder than it should have for that time of year. The windows of the trailer fogged from the inside, but the mirror in the bathroom steamed up without me running water on my second night. The alarm clock beside my cot stopped blinking. Not like the power went out, it just froze. 3:13 a.m., I know, because I watched it stay there while I sat up in bed, sweating like I'd run a mile. I hadn't heard anything, but I'd woken up gasping, heart pounding. The trailer was quiet, too quiet. I flicked on my flashlight and walked to the narrow window that looked out toward the tower. Something had moved the boom. That crane hadn't been touched since I arrived, but the boom now pointed slightly off-center, angled just enough for me to notice. I told myself it was windy. Wind does weird things with structures that tall, but when I stepped outside the next morning to check, there were fresh prints in the frost-covered mud. Not boot prints, bare, human-shaped, but too long in the toe, too narrow in the arch. I didn't take a picture. I didn't want to admit it was real. They told me this tower site had gone through 3 operators in 2 months. Family emergencies, was what the report said. Nobody ever stayed long enough to finish the job. But the pay keeps rising, and desperation makes you ignore the little things. The twitch in your gut, the way your dreams feel like they're trying to warn you. By the end of my 3rd night, I started hearing clicks in the radio static. Not voices, just sharp, deliberate ticks like someone was tapping a fingernail on the other end of the line. The weirdest part, it always started around 3:13 a.m. I kept telling myself I was just tired. That isolation messes with your head. That being 200 feet up in a metal box in the dead of night would make anyone see things, hear things. But I knew, deep down, I wasn't alone. The forest wasn't empty. The tower wasn't just steel. And that thing, whatever it wasn't just watching me. It was waiting. The wind had stopped that second night, just like the last. No rustle in the trees, no groan from the crane's steel frame. Just a silence so deep, it felt like pressure against my skull. That's when I heard it, barely a sound at first. Hey, tap, then another. At first I thought it was the structure settling, or maybe my own breath playing tricks in the confined cab. But the rhythm didn't match anything natural. It was too deliberate. Tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. It was like something knocking or climbing. The walkie on my hip fizzed once. No voice, just static, but I didn't key it up. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what might come through. I glanced down from the operator's seat and scanned the metal staircase coiling along the tower. The safety floodlights that lit the base had started flickering again. Same as the night before, casting long, twisting shadows that looked like they moved just half a second too slowly. The next morning, I checked the cameras we'd rigged around the construction site. Footage should have been clean. Instead, every frame from midnight to 3 a.m. was scrambled with lines like E. Someone had dragged nails across the film, except we weren't using film, and no animals could reach that height. Still, I convinced myself it was just a hardware glitch, just interference. But I didn't really believe that. The following night, I brought up my own camera, a motion-triggered one, battery-powered, separate from the site's system. I set it facing the stairwell from the window. Around 2:12 a.m., the knocking came again, only louder this time, closer. I didn't move. I just stared into the dark where the floodlights used to shine. That's when my camera went off. 5 shots, evenly spaced. Nothing moved on the stairwell. But when I checked the memory card at dawn, only 4 photos had been saved. The 5th was corrupted. I opened it anyway. My screen turned black for a second, then the whole device shut off, battery full. When it finally rebooted, that image of the corrupted one flashed for just a moment before disappearing again. I only caught a glimpse, but I swear, in that split second, there was a shape in the photo, hanging on to the metal steps. Mid-climb, long fingers, far too long. No face I could make out. But the body didn't look right. I went to the foreman the next day, casually asked if any of the other guys had seen or heard anything strange on the night shift. He looked at me like I'd just asked if he believed in ghosts. "It's quiet up there," he said. "Just you and sky." "Why? Something bugging you?" I lied, said no. But I watched him closely after that. He never came near the crane after dark. None of them did. I hadn't noticed it before, but they always made sure I was the last one up there. The dreams began after that. I'd drift off for minutes at a time, and every time I did, I'd dream I was still in the cab. Except I wasn't alone. I could hear breathing behind me. Close, not quite human, heavy, wet, like lungs that had never breathed air before. And just before I woke, a whisper in my ear, same every time. "You brought it up." I started locking the hatch to the crane cab. Not that it'd help. Twice now, I've found it unlatched in the morning. Once, I found muddy prints inside the cab, along the back wall, not boot prints. Hands, long fingers again. 6 of them per hand. They smeared when I touched them mud, or something like it. It smelled like rot and copper. My flashlight flickered. I got the hell out of there before I could look too close. But I keep going back. Not just because it's my job, it's like I'm being pulled. Like the crane itself wants me there. Last night, I tried to stay grounded, told the foreman I wasn't feeling well. He almost forced me back up. He said, "You're the only one who doesn't complain about the noise." "What noise?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just walked off, fast back. In the cab, I counted the steps again on the way up. Exactly 128. Same as always. But it felt longer, as if space stretched between each platform. I swear I passed the same section twice, same chipped railing, same cigarette burn on the ledge. My legs ached, but I couldn't stop. Not until I reached the top. It was waiting for me again. Not in plain sight, of course. But the feeling, that weight, the unnatural stillness of the air. And then, the tapping returned. But not on the stairs. This time, it came from under the floor, and I knew it was inside. It was the 4th night, when I finally snapped. I hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a time. Every creak in the steel, every faint tap against the outer shell of the operator's cabin, every whisper that slid beneath the howling wind, I'd written them off as tricks of fatigue. But now, with my mind hollowed by exhaustion, the line between imagination and reality was blurring, and that's when I started seeing it clearly. Around midnight, I gave up trying to sleep and turned to the maintenance logbooks. Anything to distract myself. One of the older binders had a cracked leather spine and smelled like it had been buried for years. It didn't have any standard entries. No checklists, no dates. Just handwritten notes in faded black ink. Uneven and slanted, like the writer had been shivering while writing. "Don't go out after dusk. You'll see it in the beams. Once it knows you've seen it, it'll never stop climbing." Another page stopped. The crane mid-ascent today. It didn't matter. It waited. It always waits. I flipped through entry after entry, mad scrawlings from some poor soul who must have operated this same crane before me. The writing devolved as the pages went on, from warnings into something closer to pleading. Pages soaked with water stains, dirt smudges, even what looked like old blood. The last legible note was the most disturbing of all. "It's not the wind tapping. It has hands." I felt bile rise in my throat as I looked around the cabin. The thought had crossed my mind before. The rhythm of the tapping, the unnatural consistency. It did sound like fingers. Hesitant, deliberate fingers. I decided to look for more evidence, something tangible. Below the floor, grate, was a small crawl space for wiring. I unscrewed the panel, expecting dust and maybe some old cables. What I found instead stopped me cold. A journal, smaller than the logbook, wrapped in canvas. But what caught my eye wasn't the book. It was the cloth beneath it. A strip of worn dark fabric covered in symbols, crude shapes, drawn in ash and something reddish-brown that had clearly dried long ago. It wasn't ink. The first few pages of the journal were nonsense, ramblings. descriptions of the wind's eyes and the thing that watches from below. But further in, the entries became more coherent. The writer, who never named himself, described being assigned to this tower years ago, just like me. But things started unraveling the same way they had for me. Footsteps on the ladder, radio static. That formed sentences, dreams that weren't dreams. One night I saw it, halfway up the ladder. I thought it was a worker, but the proportions were wrong. Too long, too thin. It looked up, and even from that distance I knew it didn't have a face. Just a stretch of skin, like wax melted over where eyes and a mouth should be. I dropped the journal. My heart was hammering. A chill that felt like it came from inside me. Not the air crept through my spine. Outside, the wind picked up, but there was no whistling. No typical metallic groans of the tower shifting. Only a soft, methodical tap against the base of the operator's cabin. I wasn't imagining it anymore. There were 3 taps, pause, then another 3. It was mimicking the same pattern I had tapped on the console earlier that evening. A nervous habit I didn't think twice about. It had been listening. I grabbed the journal and the fabric strip, unsure of what I'd do with them, but unwilling to leave them behind. My eyes were drawn back to the cloth O symbols. I didn't recognize the language, but something about them stirred a primal discomfort, like a warning left behind by a culture that had long since been consumed. As I stared, I realized the tapping had stopped, but something else had replaced it, a sound just outside the window. Something wet, something like breathing, but it wasn't normal breathing. It sounded stretched, like lungs too large for a human body exhaling in slow, syrupy drags. My breath caught in my throat. I turned to look at the small window beside the operator's chair. There was nothing there, but the reflection showed something just behind me. A long figure, taller than any human, stretched and hunched, standing inches from my back. I spun around, empty, but my body knew better. It had been there. It had been in here with me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. It was as if whatever was near had siphoned the air from my lungs. My ears rang. My vision wavered. I collapsed to my knees, clutching the journal like it was a holy object. At that moment, I didn't just believe the previous operator's words. I felt them. That thing, whatever it was, wasn't just climbing. It had arrived, and it wanted me to know. I don't remember falling asleep. One second I was staring at the last journal page. The next, my eyes snapped open to daylight, or at least something pretending to be it. Gray and weak light filtered in through the dusty window, barely illuminating the corners of the operator's cabin. For a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a dream. The markings, the noises, the thing on the ladder, maybe my brain had finally cracked from too many nights alone up here. But then I turned my head and saw the window. 5 long pale streaks had appeared down the outside glass. They weren't handprints exactly, more like the residue of something that had dragged long. Skeletal fingers across the surface, as if it had stood there watching me sleep. I shot up. The journal still lay open on my lap, and the cloth with the strange symbols had been folded neatly beside me, as if someone or something had taken care to place it there. A cold dread tightened in my chest. I wasn't alone last night. I never had been. I grabbed my bag, didn't even bother packing anything else. I needed to get down. I needed to put distance between me and this tower. The hatch screeched open above the ladder, and the gust of cold air that hit me felt unnatural, like it came from deeper underground rather than the sky. I stepped onto the ladder and began descending, but something was wrong. I climbed down for what felt like 20 minutes, rung after rung, careful and fast, but when I looked down, the ground was still impossibly far away. Worse, when I glanced up, the cabin was still just above me. The tower hadn't changed. I hadn't descended at all. Panic started to creep in. My breathing quickened. My arms already ached, but I kept going, pushing past the burn. Another 15 minutes, still no progress. That's when I heard the tapping again, not from above this time, but below. 3 sharp taps, followed by silence, then 3 more, always spaced perfectly apart. I froze, listening. It echoed up the metal like someone or something was coming, and fast. The taps grew louder, climbing toward me, although I saw no shape, no body, just those perfect, rhythmic knocks on the metal. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice was caught somewhere deep in my throat, like fear had strangled it. I kept descending, faster now, reckless, my boots slamming against the rungs. Then the fog rolled in, from below and above, thick and gray, swallowing the world. I could barely see my own hands. The ladder seemed endless. I stopped counting the rungs. I lost all sense of time. My arms felt like dead weight. I was shaking, not just from exhaustion, but from the growing certainty that this was no longer the tower I had climbed up 2 days ago. The steel frame around me started to twist, not physically, but visually. It shimmered like heat waves, bending, ever so slightly, just enough to let my mind doubt what was real. The trees below didn't look like trees anymore. Their branches reached upward like arms, waving or beckoning. I finally saw the platform at the base of the tower, but it didn't feel like salvation. The concrete looked slick and wet, almost like flesh. The truck was there, but warped, as if time had melted it. Its shape was slightly off, like a drawing made from memory. Still, I pushed on. My boots hit solid ground with a hollow echo. I ran. I didn't know where, didn't care. I just needed to move, to put the tower behind me. But when I turned to look back, there was nothing. No steel, no cabin, no ladder, just trees. Trees that seemed to pulse, like lungs inhaling the thick air, and above them black sky. No stars, no moon, just the suggestion of eyes in the dark. I made it to the truck, trembling, breathless, fingers fumbling with the keys. The ignition turned. The headlights cut a pale path through the woods. But the dirt path I came in on was gone. In its place was a winding trail, hemmed in by trees that leaned far too close, branches caressing the side mirrors like fingers tracing a face. I drove anyway, fast, too fast. Branches scraped across the windshield like nails. The forest didn't move naturally. It reacted to me, bending, twisting, always just slightly ahead of the headlights. I don't remember getting home. I don't remember how many turns I made or how much gas I burned. I only remember blinking and finding myself in my own driveway at dawn, the engine dead cold, the windshield cracked, the tires covered in a rust-red mud I'd never seen before. My phone had no missed calls, no emails, as if the world had simply moved on without me, or as if I'd never left. I tried to report it. I really did. I called my supervisor. They said there hadn't been any crew sent to that tower in over 2 years. The whole site was decommissioned after a storm compromised its structure. They even sent me photos. The tower had collapsed. Rusted debris, wild overgrowth, nature reclaiming concrete. I stared at those pictures for a long time. I know what I saw. I was there. I lived in that cabin. I climbed that ladder. But now, when I go back to the GPS coordinates, there's nothing, just trees. And yet sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That sound, 3 taps on the window, then silence, then 3 more. Always in threes, always patient, as if it's waiting for me to climb again. As if I never really left. I haven't been able to sleep since. Not the way I used to, anyway. I close my eyes and see rungs stretching endlessly down into fog. I hear the ticking of that old wall clock that never ticked before, and then stopped when something passed by. My dreams don't belong to me anymore. I think they belong to the tower now, or to whatever was inside it. I know how all of this sounds. I do. If I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't believe a word either. That's why I haven't told anyone. Not my supervisor. Not my brother. Not even the woman I was seeing before the job. I just said I burned out. I needed a break. Left out the part about waking up to handprints on the glass. About time looping inside the ladder. About a presence that doesn't just watch, it remembers you. Have you ever felt that? Like something you can't name has latched onto your shadow. Like every creak in the hallway at night is just a little too slow, a little too deliberate, like it's waiting for you to respond. That's what it's been like for me ever since I came back. I moved out of my place 3 weeks ago, got rid of the truck. I don't even know why. Paranoia, maybe, or instinct. Whatever followed me back from that site, it knows how to find things. It doesn't need cell towers or GPS. It just waits, quietly, patiently. Some nights, when the wind dies and everything else goes silent, I hear that sound again, 3 knocks, always in threes. On the window, on the wall, behind my bed. Once I heard it from inside the closet. I never opened the door. I just sat there in the dark, back pressed to the floor, trying not to breathe too loud. It never tries to get in. It doesn't have to. It already has a piece of me. Maybe that's all it ever needed. I tried researching the site, by the way. Tried finding records of who built that tower, who last operated it, if any incidents had been reported. Nothing useful. A few vague mentions of electromagnetic anomalies in old infrastructure maps. One local story buried in a thread from 10 years ago, a surveyor who vanished while working alone. They found his pack at the base of the collapsed structure, but not his body. No one looked too hard. Apparently, he didn't have a family, just a name, like me. I don't want you to look for it. I'm serious. If you're the kind of person who thinks all of this is just some elaborate story, or some sleep-deprived guy trying to scare strangers online, fine. But don't look. Don't go searching for a crane in the woods, or a dirt road that ends in silence. Don't follow the coordinates. The place doesn't exist on maps, because it doesn't want to. Not until you're already inside it, and once you are, you'll never leave. Not all of you anyway. I think that's the worst part. Knowing some part of me stayed behind, still stuck on that endless ladder, or in that cabin with the black windows that look like eyes. Sometimes I catch myself glancing out my apartment window and expecting to see steel framing above the treetops. Sometimes I hear static, not from a radio, but in my ears, like a signal trying to come through, like I'm still connected to something I never meant to touch. So I guess that's why I'm telling you all this, because I need someone to know, someone to carry it with me. I'm not asking you to believe every word. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But maybe if you ever hear knocking where there shouldn't be, if you ever feel like something is watching you from the dark, don't investigate. Don't wait to see what it is. Just go. And if you ever stumble on a site with rusted steel, no signal, no birds, and a cabin perched higher than the trees, burn it. Burn it to the ground. Don't go inside. Don't climb. Because if you do, you won't come back the same. If you come back at all. Have you ever worked a night shift in the middle of nowhere? Somewhere so quiet, you could hear your own blood moving if you stood still long enough. I know someone out there has. Maybe you've seen strange lights in the trees. Maybe you've heard your name whispered on an empty channel. Maybe you've had that moment, you know, the one where something climbed out of the dark and stared at you like it knew you. If that's happened to you, I want to hear it. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, not because I'm looking for entertainment, but because I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to believe that whatever finds me up there on that tower, it's not just mine to carry, but a warning. Before you type anything, if you have seen it, if you've heard the knocking, or felt the presence, don't say its name. Don't describe the ladder in detail. Don't talk about how many rungs it had or how long you were climbing. That's how it finds new voices. That's how it spreads. And if you decide to listen to the next story, just promise me one thing. Don't do it alone. Because some stories don't just stay stories. Some of them, they come looking for you.